Hey, what's up, guys? It's Bakes here, and thank you for joining me for this episode of my random album reviews. It does feel like it's been a little while since I last did an episode in this series, so I'm super excited to get into today's episode, which is actually going to be a little bit different. It's definitely going to be a shorter one because today we actually have an EP from the year 2015 by an Australian pop punk band called With Confidence, and this EP is titled Distance. This is a band that I've been into since their first full-length album, which was the follow-up to this one. It was titled Better Weather. I'm pretty sure it came out a year later, if my memory is right. As I said, an Australian pop-punk band. You could maybe go so far to say pop-rock, but very similar. You wouldn't be wrong either subgenre you chose there. And like I said, this is actually going to be the first EP featured in this series, and I know a lot of people are going to be saying it's called Random Album Reviews, but I keep this with the rest of my albums. It's my series, so I can do whatever I want. So yes, now I do EPs too. But this is one I'm super excited to get into. Like I said, it's just been a little while since my last episode in this series. But like I normally do, I'll start off with a little bit of history between myself and this EP. Then I'll go into actually breaking it down as a whole, go into a few of the tracks, and then finally finish off with a score out of 10. So hopefully you guys enjoy it, and let's get into With Confidence and their EP, Distance. So this was actually a pretty interesting one to draw off my shelf for my random album reviews, because I picked this one up maybe a handful of years ago, and I pretty much just picked it up in passing. I saw it in a second-hand store, and I knew what it was. I was familiar with the EP, it wasn't just like I was like, okay, what the fuck is this? And I knew a couple of songs off it, not overly well. This wasn't ever an album that I was probably going to pick up just from my own will of, finding it and seeking it out. But seeing it there, knowing it was With Confidence, a band that I do like, and I can't lie, the price also played a factor into picking it up as well because it was very cheap. But that was pretty much it. I've had it in my collection for a handful of years now, like I said, and I don't actually listen to it too often. Whenever I do listen to this EP, it's while it's being shuffled with the rest of the band's catalogue and albums. And it sounds weird, but I'm only actually putting it together in my head now. But preparing for this review could have been the first time listening to this album by itself in full from front to back. So that's pretty much my history with this EP. Very short, not much detail to go into, but like I said, picked it up sort of on a whim a handful of years ago. So drawing this EP for the review, I actually didn't mind since, like I said, I did know the track list by now, but also on the same hand, I never really knew it either, if that kind of makes sense. I know the songs in passing, and maybe the best way to put it is there wasn't one single song on this album that I'd be able to sing word for word. A lot of it was just kind of, I remember the melody, I sort of vaguely remember the choruses, but I never truly knew any of the songs that well. So the preparation for this review was a good chance to sort of take a deeper dive into this EP, and I thought it was a cool opportunity to do that. So like I said, I wasn't disappointed drawing this one for the review. And on top of that, it's also an EP, so if it wasn't really my vibe, it doesn't stick around too long anyway, because it's only a track list of 5 songs. But all that aside, it was also a good chance to get back into With Confidence again, since it had been a little while since I kind of binged any of their music, and I actually had to check to see if they had anything new out, and to my disappointment, I actually found out that they had split, which kind of sucks. I was looking for something more positive, like an album that had come out I wasn't aware of, but no, they actually disbanded. But that also drove me to pick up the last of their albums, which I actually didn't own, which I also think is actually their best album, which makes it really weird I didn't own it, being their second full-length album, Love and Loathing, which I've only sort of recently added to my collection over the past, 4 months or so. So moving on and getting into my thoughts of this EP upon revisiting, or maybe a better term, deep diving into it, it was a weird mix of being what I expected while also being surprisingly better too. What I mean by that is it's nothing spectacular. There is not one song here that I'd consider to be in the band's best ever hits. I would even go so far to say if you moved the 5 songs that are offered here onto the band's first album, none of them would even make it into the better half of songs offered there. But like I said, it was also something that I was pleasantly surprised with, by its quality, by its enthusiasm, the enjoyment that I still managed to find on this EP. Like I said, I've grown to know, or at least know of, all of the songs on this EP, but before picking it up, the only two songs that I had heard were London Lights and Godzilla. And though both of them have grown on me, and neither are bad songs at all, maybe those two weren't helping with going into this EP with too high of expectations. Like I said, those two tracks have grown on me, and neither of them are terrible. But a couple of others that I was actually unfamiliar with turned out to be the songs that did land with me a little bit better. So this EP opens with the song Take Me Away, which is a good bar to set at least average expectations at. It's actually one of the more likable songs to myself, and it's nothing flashy, it's actually quite simple, but it's enough to give it, a slight edge. Then to Drive, which is track number 2, and again is quite simple in structure and approach, but it just doesn't pay off the same as Take Me Away. Where Take Me Away had little patches of changing patterns and giving a little bit more range in vocal style. This one feels a little bit more lifeless and kind of one that becomes a forgettable track. But then we go to London Lights, which is the third track off this EP, also signalling the halfway mark already. And it's a split song because half the track falls into formulas, but like Take Me Away, cracks of character shine through in moments like the bridge into the outro. Kind of fitting the halfway mark of this album also signals the halfway mark for the standard overall, or at least in my opinion, it sort of signals that too. The second to last track is probably my pick for Sleeper Song, being I Will Never Wait, which I'll at least put the title of Most Surprising on. I think what stands out to me most with this song, and comparing it to the band's overall catalogue, is that it shows the best qualities of what made the songs off the band's first album, Better Weather, work. The band shows, pun not intended, confidence by trying some things, adding some flair. I also like how it reflects some of the better songs off the band's debut album, like Dinner Bell in particular. And then the EP closes with the fifth and last track being Godzilla, which, like I said earlier, was one that I was familiar with beforehand. It's trying something different by starting real basic and letting it build, and other than that, besides, to be fair, a strong writing performance as well, it's not overly one that I do gravitate to either, which is an unfortunate way to kind of close this EP, but like I said, still not a bad song either, just not one that I gravitate to. Reiterating what I said earlier, this album had glimpses of surprising moments, but also in the same breath, it's also roughly where I expected it to at least peak at. It's cool to see a lot of the blueprints of ideas that later went on to work better with the band's follow-up debut album, which isn't uncommon for songs off an EP before a debut album to sort of reflect each other. And I could see any of these songs sort of sliding into the lineup of that first album and not feeling way out of place. Like I said earlier also though, none of them would fall into the stronger half of the lineup of the first album, but to look at it in a more positive light, none of them would pale in comparison either, which I think is a decent effort. It's a shame that the band have called it. I really don't know anything about the breakup, so hopefully it's temporary. I should probably do my research and look into why they broke up, because I might be regretting that in case there was a bit of controversy, but it also explains why I've seen lead vocalist, I think his name's Jaden Seeley, do some solo stuff, so that also kind of makes sense. But a young band who have had experience now, this is their EP, as I said, but they've done 3 full-length albums, and they know what works, and they overall have a massive upside, but for a debut effort, as I said, not debut album effort, it's a good first step. It wasn't like they sprinted out of the gate, but they did it pretty well. So to give this EP a rating out of 10, it is always different rating an EP compared to an album, just because it is a shorter track list, and there's less songs, so the overall average is a bit harder to scale. But for this one, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10, which is about just average, right in the middle. It's not bad, it's nothing that blows me away, it's not going to be one that I come back to very often. Like I said, it probably will just stay in the rotation of shuffling the band's entire catalogue and playing it with the rest of their albums, but at least a few of the songs here will stand out to me a little bit more, and I'm more familiar with them now, so I think that's pretty cool. But thank you guys for joining me for this random album review. Like usual, I'll have a track list ranking of this EP up at the same time, so if you want to hear me rank the 5 songs from my least favourite to favourite, go check out that video as well. But if you have any input that you want to put out from this EP, your thoughts on it, or just on With Confidence in general, let me know in the comments below, guys. But either way, thank you for joining me again, and I'll see you for another video soon, guys. Peace.